How should you be fueling for your long runs? How much carbs should you be eating, electrolytes, and or drinking? Today, I'm gonna break down for you exactly how much to be eating, drinking, and fueling so you can crush your next long run and improve your running performance times. Hello there, my friend, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Alyssa Lennick. I have a PhD in exercise physiology with a specialty in metabolism and sports nutrition along the way. And I myself am an endurance athlete. I ran over 17 ultramarathons, and I've made about every fueling mistake you can make along the way. Today, I want to break down to you exactly what you need to be thinking about when it comes to fueling for your long runs. One, so they don't crush you, but two, so you can improve your performance within them. Eating on the long run is not just about surviving, it's about thriving and being able to execute and show up for your performance and your goals, and then also recover after them. Also, it's storming really bad here while I'm making this video. The thunder here is just to add dramatic effect to how important it is for you to eat enough carbs during your long run. So many runners make the mistake of neglecting their nutrition. They will buy the most expensive shoes. They will do the perfect training programs, the perfect splits, do all the reps, sets, everything. And then when they show up to race day, the thing that ends up causing them to fall flat, miss their PR, and or hit that wall is a lack of carbs, water, or salt. When it comes to your long run nutrition, those are the three things that we really want to be thinking about that are going to allow you to execute, perform, feel well, recover, all of the things. My personal favorite saying is fed is fast. That doesn't just apply to what you eat during the day, it applies to what you eat during your long runs. And you shouldn't be afraid of eating during your long runs or eating carbs or adding too many calories to your day. The food that you're eating during your long runs is being used during that run to fuel that activity, and you still are going to even need more fuel after to recover from it. When you're taking in carbs during your long runs, it's going to be used almost instantaneously. It's going to come in, be absorbed by your gut, go into your bloodstream and be delivered to your muscle tissues for energy metabolism. It isn't making you fat, it isn't making you slow, and it isn't a problem unless you don't train and practice to eat enough of it or don't eat enough of it at all. So now that I'm done trying to convince you that you should eat on your runs, and I think we're all in agreement there that it's a good idea, let me break down for you how much of these things you actually need. First, let's start with carbs. Carbs are incredibly necessary for you to be taking in on long runs or if you're training for long endurance events. Your body is crushing through carbohydrate when you are running. I don't care if you're running in zone 2. I don't care if you're fat adapted. I don't care if you are thinking that you're relying more on fats because you're doing easier running. Your body is still crushing through carbs during that training. And I can tell you that because I've looked at hundreds of metabolism exercise tests, and I'm telling you, no matter how much fat you think you're burning, you are still burning and using a ton of carbs. Now, how much carbs you need will depend on how long you're running and or potentially the intensity of that run. When it comes to running, we have some easy rule of thumbs when we think about how many grams of carbohydrates we need per hour on those runs. Now, if you're running under 60 minutes, you likely don't need anything more than water on that run, and or anything at all, depending on how far you're going and or the heat or whatever other conditions are outside. You typically can get away with not taking in carbohydrates for 60 up to 90-minute runs because you have enough carbohydrates stored in your muscles from the foods and the meals that you're eating. That is assuming you're eating enough carbs in your meals. However, when we get to runs that are starting to be greater than 60 to 90 minutes, we start to tap into our glycogens or glucose or carb stores in our muscles. The more intense we're running in this 60 to 90 minute window, the more we're burning through those carbs. So that doesn't mean that you have to wait till 90 minutes to start eating carbs. You can start at 60 minutes. Personally, I take a gel or a little bit of fuel with me on every run 60 minutes or longer. It does not hurt to eat on your runs, even if it's under 60 minutes. Nothing happens if you bring a little carby snack. For me, I feel like it helps significantly contribute to my recovery from those runs. And it's also another way for me to practice fueling on runs and help me contribute to gut tolerance of carbohydrates. Because when we start to run longer distances, it's recommended to start eating more carbs. So if you're in that 60 to 90 minute window, you might start taking in somewhere like 30 to 60 grams of carbs in that window. And anything 1 to 2 hours, roughly 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour is a good rule of thumb or recommendation. Now, that 30 grams per hour is definitely on the lower end of the scale of what is starting to be recommended for running, fueling, and nutrition. But when you're doing shorter duration runs, 90 to 120 minutes doesn't seem short. You still have lots of storage there. You're only needing a little bit. Typically, we're seeing more and more in the sports nutrition literature and even athletes in application crushing really high volumes of carbs during their runs, even in shorter duration events. More doesn't hurt if you can tolerate it, but it might not be necessary, or you might not tolerate higher amounts of grams of carbs to start. So start with the 30 and build up to 60 over time if you're running in this range. Now, when we start running 2.5 or more hours, we want to start thinking about shifting towards 60 to 90 grams per hour. And I know that seems really crazy, but some of these elite runners nowadays are showing us that they are taking in almost cyclist levels of carbohydrates during their runs, and they're tolerating with the oscillation of the movement of running and their gut, which is pretty crazy. This past year in 2025, and I'm making this video at the Western States 100-mile endurance race, some of these elite athletes were taking over 100 grams of carbs per hour, and many of them between 60 and 90 across the entire race. The caveat being that they train that and practice that in their running. So as you get into these 2-hour plus runs, especially my friends watching this who run marathons or ultramarathons like me, you really want to think about getting past that idea of only 60 grams per hour and pushing your threshold of maybe getting into the 70, 80 to 90 grams per hour of carbohydrate. Now, again, this will take a lot of practice. You want to work with lower amounts and build up slower. You have to build up your gut's tolerance to it, or you will have some wonky woes that happen to you on your runs to help you with this. It's also something that needs practice at higher intensities where it might be harder to take in food. You might want to take in more things like gels versus longer, slower intensities when you're training for something like a marathon or an ultramarathon, where something like chewing and eating or even whole foods might be a little bit more tolerable for you there. I can tell you though, training to work up and improve how much carbohydrate you're taking in per hour when you are running makes a massive, massive difference. And one of my favorite signs that you can do to tune in to see if you need to eat more carbs on your run or you're not eating enough or you're underfueling is when you finish a long run and you come home, you shouldn't feel dead, you can't function, you can't do anything the rest of the day, an absolute zombie, useless to society. Not to say that you don't deserve a nap or some couch rotting time when you finish your run, but if you feel that brain dead fogginess or if someone let you loose in a grocery store, you go absolutely hog wild, that's probably a sign that you didn't eat enough carbs during your run. On the runs where I crush my carbohydrate intake, no matter how far I ran, no matter how long I ran, no matter how many hours I even ran, I leave them feeling not totally depleted, not totally dead, and like I can actually make a cognitive decision about what I'm going to eat next that isn't the little gremlin voice inside of me saying, sugar, fried food, because I just need anything to meet my biological need to get in food because I'm so hangry and starving. So what kind of carbs should you be taking in on your runs? When it comes to that, there's a lot of common sports nutrition products. You have gels, you have chews, and these work really well. They're commercially available. There are endless brands of these. These are just 2 examples that I had conveniently available for me to make this video with for you to try. You can also use powder carbohydrate drinks. Again, there's a ton of these on the market. I personally find it really easy for me as someone who doesn't like to eat a lot of my runs to drink a lot of my carbs during my trail running days, especially when I'm outside for a long time, where I'm constantly sipping on some carbs and filling in the gaps in food or nutrition supplements. But it's again about finding what works best for you. Now, if you're not in the market or the budget for buying a bunch of fancy sports nutrition supplements, you can also use things like candy or fruit snacks as well to meet your carbohydrate needs. The one caveat to this that I will say is that if you are someone who is pushing the envelope on how many carbs you're taking in per hour, the difference between some of these commercially available regular foods and these sports nutrition specific products is these often have a ratio of glucose to fructose that is made specifically in a way that you can uptake 2 different types of carbohydrate in your gut at the same time, so you can take in more and get in more carbs without GI distress. If you're taking in pure glucose or a lot of fructose or only one type of carb, or you're not taking it in that specially formulated ratio, you might have a harder time getting in more carbohydrates without GI distress. So make sure you're using it appropriately, potentially alongside sports nutrition products if you're aiming for higher grams of carbs per hour. And lastly, for my trail runners like me, you're probably gonna be eating some real foods, whole foods, or things that are a little bit more filling. And I love using things like graham crackers, regular crackers. You can use pretzels, you can use chips, there's cookies, candy, everything that you can imagine at aid stations, pierogies, potatoes, all that stuff. You can use regular foods to help you meet your needs and goals, but you're probably gonna have to complement this with gels, goos, or drinks along the way, or Coke at an aid station to help you get there and meet those goals and needs. Generally, regardless of the distance you're going, how fast or slow you're running, you wanna rely specifically on carbs for this and not on a ton of fats or protein. While you might have hints or traces or small bits of that for ultra endurance events, it's probably not going to be the majority of what you're using and might slow down digestion. Your body really is just torching through carbs, and that's what you need. So again, to recap, less than an hour, you probably don't need any carbohydrates. An hour to an hour and a half, maybe something like 30 to 60 grams to start, maybe up to 2 hours, 30 to 60 grams per hour in that range. Once we're getting into 90 minutes to 2.5 hours plus, we want to think about taking in 60 to 90 grams per hour, potentially even more if you're tolerating it, every single hour that we're running. That might require you to practice and start with less and build it up slowly over time to get to that. And it really does require you to practice your nutrition and your carbohydrates during your training so that when you get to race day, you have it locked in, you know what your gut tolerates, you know what you like, you know what you're willing to eat during different efforts and conditions and or doesn't make you feel the ick during it, and or doesn't lead to a bathroom emergency or a ton of gut distress on race day. The last thing you want to do is not practice eating during your training and then show up to a race with a nutrition plan that's going to leave you running for the porta potties or keeling over with a side cramp in the middle of the race. Now, of course, carbs aren't the only thing that you're taking in during your runs. You should also be taking in water and potentially electrolytes or salt supplements as well. Let's first start with water and hydration. Now, daily hydration is important, and we know that, and that's a different topic for another day. But when you're talking about what you're taking in during your running, you want to be taking in about 4, 6, maybe 8 ounces every 15 to 20 minutes during your run. And the more hot and humid it is, the more fluid you will need to be taking in. And the more you sweat as an individual, the more fluid you will be needing to take in. The issue is for some of us, you can only digest so much water at a time or so much per hour, and you may potentially be someone who sweats more than what you can take in, and you're gonna have to do your best to keep up for that. But that's a rough estimate of how much you should take in per hour, or something like a liter-ish, 16 ounces per hour is probably a good place to aim, which for most of us, somewhere between that 0.6 to 1 liter of fluid is about a handheld bottle, which is a great thing to aim for per hour in our runs or your soft flask in your running vest as an easy rule of thumb to think about. Now, if you're having a trouble with hydrating, I do like handhelds or soft flasks because they do allow you to keep a better tab on how much you're actually drinking than some of the bladders that you put in your pack, unless you're someone who's really good at knowing that you're drinking enough or drinking through that or using that to supplement or complement the other sources of water that you're drinking. It's all about just making sure that you're aware that you are drinking enough and getting in what you need and are consistently hydrating throughout your run. And it might be strategic and advantageous to drink your water in small bits or small sips rather than chugging it all at once across your hour or across your run, and kind of keeping in this routine with eating and drinking almost every 15 to 20 minutes on your run in general is a really good habit to get in, because sometimes on your long runs or race day, you're not going to want to keep eating or drinking, and eating and drinking might be the thing that keeps you from bonking or hitting that wall. In more extreme weather conditions, you need to be aware of 2 things. One, when it's hot and humid out and you are sweating, you're not evaporating as much, you're going to be sweating more, and you may need upwards of even 1.5 to 2 bottles per hour. And you need to account for that and bring that with you on your runs, because you might need to increase that water intake in relation to that. Similarly, a lot of people think when it's cooler out or cold out in the winter, you don't need to hydrate as much because you don't have the same strong signal for thirst or sweat, and we tend to not bring water on those runs. But an easy rule of thumb is if you're running for an hour or more, you should always have water with you and be drinking it during the run. You're still sweating or using water for energy metabolism, and any decreases in blood plasma volume or dehydration can directly impair your performance or even recovery or how you feel, or cause your heart rate to drift across your run, something known as cardiac drift. Just like carbohydrates, you should practice and figure out how much water you are drinking or needing during different environments or during runs so you can account for that on race day. And don't always wait to drink to thirst, because sometimes you might be behind what you actually need, but that doesn't mean you need to chug things prematurely. Sometimes thirst is a great indicator that you need more water, but we don't want to wait into the very last minute. And last but not least, electrolytes. Electrolytes have gotten a lot of hype in the online space recently, mostly as a daily nutrition supplement. And as runners, we are actually typically one of the populations that actually need to be taking these in, potentially every day, maybe not every day. When it comes to electrolyte supplements, there's a few rules of thumbs I like to think about. One, if you're a recreational runner who's not running for super long periods of time, maybe 30, 45, under 60 minutes of your runs, you get in enough salt or sodium or electrolyte type minerals in your diet, you might not need to add in any more of this to your runs pre, post, or intra at all. But if you're somebody who is a heavy sweater, you lose a lot of salt when you sweat. If you can notice that you can dust off the salt when you're sweating afterwards, you probably are a heavy, salty sweater. Or you're running for long periods of time in heat and humidity, or very long periods of time in general, you likely need to supplement with electrolytes. Now, how much will depend on you and your own personal electrolyte needs. Some people are more salty sweaters, like I mentioned, some people less, and the environment and conditions in which you're running in. hot and humid conditions will require probably higher electrolyte needs for some of you than what you might need in, say, cooler temperatures of running. The general rule of thumb is between 300 to 1,000 milligrams per hour, which is a really wide range. And it's hard to perfectly say. That's God telling you not to drink electrolytes if you don't need them. Now, 300 to 1,000 milligrams is a really wide range. And just like carbohydrates, you're gonna have to practice taking in salt to figure out what kind of works for you. In cooler temperatures, you likely need a lower amount versus high in hot and humid conditions, you might need a higher amount. And I think for many runners, they underestimate how much they actually need because it's really hard to figure out if you're hypo or hypernatremic with salt and electrolytes because some of the symptoms of dehydration and over salting can be similar and it's hard to exactly know. And it really is something that you have to just trial and error with yourself. Sometimes we can feel flat or bonky or not great in our runs and thinking it's carbohydrate, but if your carbohydrates are in line and you're still feeling that fuzzy feeling, super flat, or getting headaches or feeling really dehydrated and tired after your runs despite fueling with carbohydrates or even water, that might be a sign that you need to increase the salt amount on your runs. I'm someone who thought I was taking in enough on my runs. I was taking in maybe 1 liquid IV per hour on my long runs when training for some ultramarathons. And I found that when I bumped it up to 1,000 milligrams per hour on my long runs, I felt significantly better, recovered better, and had better runs. And so sometimes it's just about experimenting on your runs. A run or two, when you're out there for hours with some extra sodium, isn't gonna be the thing that leads to negative health. I don't want you guys to think that I'm telling you to go become so salty that you give yourself high blood pressure. The idea is that the people that need these high levels of sodium during running are already so active and sweating and using these electrolytes so much that you're replacing and replenishing them, not superseding what your body needs from basic metabolic health and function. So to recap, when it comes to electrolytes, you wanna think somewhere between 300 to 1,000 milligrams per hour. And you wanna trial and error that with yourself and adjust it based off the weather and the conditions of what you're doing. And something that a lot of people don't talk about often is that the salt in these are important. So are the other minerals, but sugar in these isn't bad either. So if you're gonna take in salt or electrolytes during your runs, having a little bit of sugar in it will actually help the uptake and hydration or contribute to your hourly carb needs, things that we actually want and need as runners. Or if you're taking in this, you wanna make sure you're balancing it with fluid and carbohydrates to help with your hydration during your run. Sugar is not the enemy when you're active, it is your friend, especially when you are on your long run. Just like carbs, there is a million products on the market for sodium and electrolytes. Personally, I use Liquid IV. I also use Element, Scratch, other things as well. And for all my favorite sports nutrition products, I'm gonna link them here for you guys so you can shop things that I like. But it's all about finding what works for you, what you like the taste of, what you tolerate, what helps fit into your sports nutrition plan. And it can change over time too, and that's okay. But these are the basic rules to follow that I highly recommend you adopt to your long run nutrition or even your moderate distance running nutrition. You don't have to be running a marathon in order to need fuel. And even some of your weekday runs might need some fueling, hydration, or salt, and that's okay too. It doesn't need to be a 2-hour run for it to be fueled and for you to be fed. And if anything, sometimes a little bit of carbs might be the boost that you need. If you found this really helpful and you want this all laid out for you in a way that makes sense, that actually teaches you how much, when, and or what to even eat before and after your exercise, I'm gonna link my Fast and Fed guide here. That's right, Fast is Fed, and Fast and Fed is my guide that breaks down for you how much you need per hour, how much you need before and after, how much you need each day, how to fuel to support your training in a smart and intelligent way, and adjust it for whatever level of fitness you are or your daily needs as well. One of the biggest mistakes I see runners, hybrid, general athletes make, or recreational athletes, which most of you are, is not eating enough and being afraid to eat enough carbs. And I wanna really encourage you to not be afraid of that and lean into that and feel how much better you feel in your recovery is, and come back to this video and tell me how much better you're feeling after your runs. I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I hope this was helpful, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.